the last lesson the last concept in this lesson is going to be about circulatory system health. So we are going to take a look at some factors that affect the health of your circulatory system, and some common diseases of the circulatory system. Now, before we begin, I just want to say, so this is not medical advice, and I am not a doctor. If you have health questions about your own specific circulatory system or somebody in your family, please contact a doctor. This is just very, very general information, okay? And this information often changes as we study and research in the medical field more. So, you know that people cannot control when they have an inherited condition, such as a heart rhythm disorder or sickle cell anemia, right? There's nothing you can do if your DNA is wrong and you make the wrong copy of the protein for your red blood cells, okay? However, and the other thing, people cannot control usually where they live, right? Or many people can't, right? If you have enough money, sometimes you can move around the country, you can move between countries, but a lot of people, especially poor people, can't control like where they live. So some people are stuck living in the same city that they were born in, and sometimes different cities, different places on Earth have different levels of pollution, right? Often, the very poorest places on our planet are often the most polluted because the people who live there don't have the money to fight the big corporations that want to dump their waste there, right? So you can't control that. You can't control your genes. But unlike genetics and the environment, however, many factors that affect the health of the circulatory system are under your control. It doesn't mean that it's easy to change these things, and I'm definitely not judging you if you do some of these things, but I want you to have some information about why they affect your circulatory system. Okay, so we're going to look at this little chart here. I know charts aren't very terribly interesting. This chart has 4 factors that are lifestyle factors, meaning it's how you choose to live your life, that affect your circulatory system and how. Okay? So like I said, not medical advice. Okay? So there are some examples on the right of choices that respect circulatory health, right? That chart, not medical advice, just the current science says these things, that doing these things should be helpful to your circulatory health, right? Everybody has different genetics, everybody has different environments. Some of these things we can't control. Some of these lifestyle things you can control. So smoking is obviously a lifestyle choice that has negative effects on your circulatory system. I want to talk about why. So cigarettes, right, contain nicotine, and the nicotine in cigarette smoke causes blood vessels to constrict. It's what we call a stimulant, meaning it creates a situation in your body that mimics when you need to be alert, right? So it's almost like acts like a little bit of a stress on your body that causes you to be more alert, okay? Now, because your blood vessels constrict, right, that means they get narrower. The heart has to pump more strongly to push the blood through the vessels, right? There's more pressure there. Okay, there's more of there's less of a space to flow, and the blood is more likely to push against itself and sort of resist the pumping. So smoking can interfere with heart contraction and relaxation because of the constriction. So some smarter choices that you could make, if you haven't started smoking yet, maybe don't start, right? Because it's bad for your heart. If you have started smoking, try to quit, right? And if you do try to quit, seek information and support from other people who can help you, like your doctor, like your family, right? It's easier if you have a smoking family to quit as a family because you can support one another. I know because I used to have a smoking family. And I'm a non-smoker, and I've always been a non-smoker. So every time we had like Thanksgiving dinner together, they would leave after everybody would leave the dining room for the garage after Thanksgiving, and they would all have a smoke, and I would stay inside with the dogs and the small children. But smoking is not good for children, so all of my brothers and sisters, and my dad, they decided to quit, and they quit together. And because there was no pressure to leave and go smoke together, they were very successful. Okay, second factor that has a negative impact on the circulatory system, substance abuse, right? So when we say substance abuse, we mean, drugs that are recreational, right? So some drugs that are recreational, like nicotine, are stimulants. So things like methamphetamines and cocaine. Okay, they are the same thing. They artificially create a situation in where your blood vessels constrict, right? And this causes your heart to have to pump harder. They can also cause damage to your heart muscle, which creates the heart attack. So like stimulants, like they can cause twitching in muscles. They make your blood vessels smaller. And of course, intravenous drug use, right? Any drugs that you inject into your veins, right, can cause blood clots that impair your circulation, and you can die from a blood clot. You might have a stroke or something. So examples of choices that respect circulatory health with respect to substance abuse: maybe don't start using drugs or alcohol. Quit them if you've already begun, and then again, seek information and support from others who can help you quit. There are also food choices. So your diet is under your direct control for the most part. There's an economic factor, right? So some people can afford to buy healthier food than others, right? And we respect that it's difficult to maintain a healthy diet and sometimes expensive. Food now, some of the nutrition science here may be changing. So it says foods high in saturated fats, meaning meats and dairy, and trans fats, which are basically illegal in North America and basically all around the world, that used to be in deep fried foods and store-made baked goods. You can check the label. Almost nothing contains trans fats now because we have laws against them. They can result in the deposit of fatty substances inside blood vessels that restrict the flow. Our view of this is changing a little bit. You do need fat in your diet to support your cell membranes. And a lot of the original scientific studies around fat were funded by Coca-Cola, and to sort of maybe focus people away from the bad effects of sugar and processed foods. So there is definitely a healthy amount of fat that you can have in your diet. Definitely unsaturated fat is better for you than saturated fat, but Newer studies are showing that saturated fats aren't necessarily, and foods that are high in cholesterol are not necessarily as bad as thought previously. Okay, foods high in refined sugar and salt can also raise your blood pressure, because the more stuff that is in your blood, the more that water will do osmosis into your blood, right? So if you have a lot of stuff in your blood, that means a lot more water needs to join it to balance it out, which creates a higher blood volume, higher blood pressure. Some choices that respect healthy circulatory system are select and eat all foods in moderation as part of a balanced diet, right? That's always the advice that they give you. You want to eat a wide variety of different foods with different nutrients, and not too much of one type, even if that one type is delicious, right? Donuts, delicious, right? Have lots of fat, have lots of sugar, probably not great for your circulatory health. Limit and omit unhealthy foods, especially those with trans fat, which again isn't a problem anymore because basically illegal, from your diet. But always check your nutrition labels, right? That's all, they're there for a reason. Make good choices, right? If you notice that your snack is 80% fat, I don't know. That's a lot of calories for you, maybe, if you don't work out every day. And then activity and exercise. So too little activity and exercise can stress the heart. When you exercise the heart, think about how much of your cardiovascular system is made up of muscle. Your heart is a muscle, right? You exercise it, it's going to get stronger. Your arteries have muscles. You exercise, they're going to get stronger, right? And they're going to be able to resist pressure more effectively. They'll tear less, right? And you'll get less scarring, and you're under less risk for atherosclerosis, or for your blood vessels rupturing. Okay, so if you don't exercise very often, your heart is stressed, it's not as strong, its contractions are less effective, which means it has to beat more. Too little exercise can cause unhealthy weight gain, which will stress the heart because it's just more body cells that it has to feed. Some decisions that respect healthy circulatory system or cardiovascular system: engage in a group or individual activity that you enjoy that allows your heart to exercise, right? Find an exercise that you like, basically, and be active for at least 30 to 60 minutes each day, which I realize is harder when you're taking a biology course on your spare time. And then factors that disturb homeostasis can harm the circulatory system. So circulatory illnesses disturb homeostasis and impair the function of the circulatory system. These illnesses affect many people in Canada, and it is likely that someone you know has one of these illnesses, even if you are not aware of it. In fact, many people who have circulatory illnesses do not even know that they have one. So many factors cause conditions that affect the proper function of the circulatory system. These include lifestyle factors that we just talked about. Circulatory illnesses may reduce the blood flow and oxygen exchange in the tissues, change heart rate and heart rhythm, and even affect defense against disease. Okay, so we're just going to take a look at 4 different diseases of the circulatory system. Atherosclerosis, if you've already done your blood pressure lab, or if you just listened to the previous lesson, we know is a condition in which the arteries narrow or become blocked by a plaque, right? A plaque is like a buildup, just like you have a buildup on your teeth. We call that plaque as well. You can have buildup in your arteries that hardens and limits blood flow to the body. It's caused by a diet high in certain fats, smoking, which weakens the arteries, and making them more susceptible to plaque buildup, and genetic factors. So some people are more susceptible to atherosclerosis. Usually that's why they ask you if heart disease runs in your family when they're taking medical histories, right? You might have genetics, which means you have to pay more close attention to the lifestyle part of it than other people. Symptoms of atherosclerosis include shortness of breath, right? Especially if you're only doing like moderate activity levels. chest tightness, and fatigue. A heart attack occurs when a blocked artery to the heart denies oxygen to the heart muscles, right? So your heart receives oxygen from the circulatory system as well. And it needs a lot of energy because it's a muscle that's constantly in use. So as soon as the heart does not receive its oxygen because the blood flow is cut off, it's going to stop beating, and that's going to cause a big cascade of problems. Atherosclerosis is known as the silent killer because many people have no symptoms until a heart attack occurs, right? So this is just something where people are maybe not aware of the symptoms, right? So monitor if you have chest tightness, if you have shortness of breath when you're doing just a small amount of physical activity, if you're always tired, just go see a doctor. Couldn't hurt. Even if it's nothing, have them run tests, right? Because you don't want to find out when you have a heart attack. Speaking of which, what kind of tests will they do? Healthcare professionals perform a physical exam to check for a weak pulse. So they'll check your radial pulse. They'll put some fingers on your wrist to see if they can sense a pulse, and like whether it's nice and regular or irregular, whether it's strong or weak. A weak pulse is a sign of a narrowed or blocked artery sometimes. Blood tests can also be performed to check your blood for the level of fat within it, right? The kinds that cause the plaques. Treatment. Sometimes atherosclerosis completely blocks an artery in the heart. In this case, a coronary bypass can surgically reroute blood flow around a blockage. Angioplasty might also be used. So a bypass is to go around the blocked blood vessel. An angioplasty, they'll loosen whatever's in there, and then they'll use a stent, which is like a strong tube, right? So they'll put a strong tube in your blood vessel wherever the blockage was, and that will keep it from collapsing again. Right? So that's what an angioplasty is. They go through the block and they put a stent in, and the stent will keep your blood vessel open. Prevention. I noticed there's nothing under prevention. Diet and exercise, all of the lifestyle factors we talked about previously. Arrhythmia is a heartbeat with an irregular rate or rhythm that occurs if the electrical signals controlling the heart are blocked or delayed. So your heart is controlled by your nervous system. It's controlled automatically, right? So we never have to think about like beat, heart, beat, 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 right? That would be, we would never do anything else, right? And what would happen when you went to sleep, right? So it's controlled automatically by your brainstem, which sends signals every time it needs your heart to beat. Sometimes they get blocked or delayed, and some causes include lots of different things. Smoking can cause an arrhythmia. Drugs can cause arrhythmia. Caffeine, right, causes your heart rate to increase. Alcohol, stress, genetics, all kinds of things can cause an arrhythmia. So symptoms would be either a heartbeat that's too fast, too slow, or irregular, anxiety, weakness, fainting, right? Sometimes if your heartbeat gets too fast, you feel anxiety because those two things usually go together. Like when you feel anxiety, your heartbeat increases. So when your heartbeat increases, sometimes it tricks your body into feeling anxiety. Kind of cool. Weakness, fainting, shortness of breath, chest pain. So what kind of tests will they run? Healthcare professionals check for an arrhythmia by monitoring your pulse, right? So they'll hook you up to an electrocardiogram, which will monitor the electrical activity of your heart, and they'll also, this is the machine they hook you up into the hospital that has, your heartbeat on it, right? So one, one sensor will measure when your heart actually contracts. One will measure the electricity going into your heart, and this way they can keep track of what's happening. Prescription medications can restore normal heart rate and rhythm. So can a pacemaker, which is a device that sends electrical signals regularly to the heart. So if they find out that it's an electrical signal problem, they can implant a little machine near your heart, and it will basically jolt your heart with electricity at regular intervals so you can have a regular heart rhythm. And of course, prevention. Some of these things you can't change. Genetics, nope. Stress, sometimes, right? Drugs, caffeine, alcohol, smoking, right? You can change those to minimize your risk of arrhythmia. Leukemia. So leukemia is the cancer of your blood or bone marrow. Here, the leuc means it's the white part. It's the white cells in which large numbers of abnormal cells are produced. These cells are typically white blood cells. They crowd out the other blood cells to the point that blood cannot carry out its function. I spelled cells wrong both times in that sentence. Yikes. Okay, please fix that. cells. The exact cause is unknown, but genetic factors and long-time exposure to carcinogens play a role. Of course, some symptoms of leukemia: fatigue, frequent infection. So the fatigue comes because your body is trying extra hard to fight infection. Infection comes because your white blood cells are part of your immune response. So if it's not working, guess what? The infections can spread quickly before your body can fight them off. Genetic factors can sometimes be at play. So sometimes leukemias are genetic, and then sometimes they result from long-term exposure to carcinogens. So a lot of the really sad news stories that you hear about where companies allow their toxic waste to leach out into communities and it impacts the groundwater. A lot of the ways that this pollution is discovered is because the community has a large amount of leukemias. Leukemias aren't super common, but if they're super common in a community, that usually indicates that there's some sort of carcinogen loose in the community, and it's very sad, especially in children. So some symptoms, the exact cause of leukemia is unknown. It's probably one of those things where you have genetic factors and you have environmental factors interacting. Most cancers are like that. Anyway, symptoms of leukemia: fatigue, frequent infection, weight loss, swollen lymph nodes. So remember I said your lymphatic system and your immune system and your white blood cells, they're all related. So when you frequently have infections, you get these swollen lymph nodes. So at the hospital, they'll run a test, and they're going to take a look at your complete blood counts, meaning they count the amount of cells in your blood, right? They take a sample and they put it on a microscope, and they do some counting and estimation, and they'll notice that there is more than a normal amount of white blood cells, because cancer, remember, they divide all the time. But they don't necessarily do anything but dividing, so they don't do their job. Blood and bone marrow will be examined as well. They'll do a biopsy to check if any of the cells are abnormal looking, cancerous looking. To treat leukemia, usually at the beginning they treat it with chemotherapy and radiation. They're trying to kill off the cancer cells, and hopefully some good cells survive. If it's severe, you might have a bone marrow transplant. So they basically irradiate, they get rid of all of your bone marrow, and you need to find somebody with the similar immune system factors as you, and they will take a sample of that person's bone marrow, and they'll transplant it into your bones. Bone marrow is where blood cells are created, right? So hopefully then you get that person's good white blood cells, and then everything is okay. So prevention, really hard to prevent because it's usually you don't know about your genetics and you don't know about pollutants in your community. Stroke occurs when the brain doesn't get enough blood. The brain cells die because they don't receive enough oxygen. 80% are caused by a blood clot blocking an artery to the brain, and 20% are due to broken blood vessels in or around the brain. So that's sort of like an aneurysm. Paralysis and impaired mental functions such as memory or speech problems often occur, right? So we have very specialized parts of our brain. So your effects when you have a stroke will depend what parts of your brain weren't getting oxygen. So if you have a stroke at the front part of your brain, usually that's like your decision making and planning and personality is all up there. So you might see people who are unable to function as well in their everyday lives, or people who have personality changes. And then you go back from the front part of your brain a little bit backwards. You have your motor function and your sensation. So people who have strokes there have trouble moving, especially fine movement. And then the sides of your brain, right? So the sides of your head, that's called your temporal lobe. A lot of speech functions are speech and hearing functions and music, things that are sound related. They're affected. They're at the back of your brain, like the back of your head, visual processing, right? So it depends where you have the stroke, the symptoms that you get, and so you can get a bunch of symptoms depending on where the stroke is, and you can get a bunch of problems afterwards. Symptoms of a stroke include weakness, speech or vision problems, headache, dizziness. If you notice like the side of somebody's face starts drooping, or they're slurring their speech, or they have vision problems out of the blue, you should get them medical help immediately. To diagnose a stroke, healthcare professionals check for vision, movement, and speech problems. They'll do an angiography where they take an x-ray of your blood vessels, basically, to see where arteries might be blocked. And then treatment, a stroke has to be treated right away. Medications that destroy blood clots, called clot busters, are given after a stroke. Blood thinners too. Angioplasty is a procedure, again, which opens up a blocked artery, and they can put a stent in to keep it open and give it strength. Post-stroke therapy is very long, can be very long, and it helps people recover their physical and mental functions after a stroke. Basically, you have to retrain new cells to do the stuff that your old dead cells did. Prevention, eating a balanced diet, not smoking, exercise regularly, maintain a healthy weight, reduce stress. So that's it for this. Again, not medical advice, but this lesson on circulatory system health. I hope you have enjoyed learning about the circulatory system.